Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.
It's that time of the week again where we look at investment on the continent. Hello and welcome. I'm Nozi Pombanjo and this is Invest Africa. Thank you for making the time to join us today. Now, whether you're investing in a bottle or in the industry, wine in Africa is a sector that is growing on the back of an emerging middle class on the continent. In South Africa, the industry is more established, recently seeing foreign direct investment coming in from the east. Nigeria, on the other hand, presents an attractive growing consumer base. And interestingly, a French company has ventured into Ethiopia, producing its first bottles of wine this year. So what does the wine industry in Africa look like to those interested in investing? Joining me at the desk here in Johannesburg is Matume Mbata. He's the marketing manager for the Americas and Africa at Wines of South Africa. And Adetunji Omatola, the founder of African Wine Circle, also joins us here at the desk. Now, for you at home, if you'd like to join in on this conversation, you can certainly do that. Keep the conversation alive by following me at CNBC Africa or at Nozi Pombanjo. And of course, the hashtag for the show is Invest Africa. Gentlemen, thank you for making the time to join us. Matume, let's start off with you taking a knock at this particular question. What is the investment case for wine? Why would one look to diversify using wine?
Well, thanks. It's a good thing to be on the show. Thanks for having me here. It's quite a broad question, but having said that, the wine industry on its own, it's a huge investment for the country from a view of we are an industry that contributes 26 billion into the country's GDP. We employ over 275,000 people in the Western Cape. And that includes both direct and indirect, and that means to a point of tourism and many other businesses around the wine industry. So it's quite a very significant industry to actually look into and have investment coming in. And it means a lot. It starts from a primary production point of view all the way through the value chain of high-end in terms of marketing and promotions globally. It's quite a broad subject.
So a big sector in South Africa that is contributing significantly to the GDP. Maybe let's turn and take a quick snapshot of the Nigerian wine industry. How big, what is the muscle of this industry?
Well, look, the research that was done, again, I think that research, the most credible one that I've seen is the one done by Wines of South Africa. But if I use the old figures, we're looking at about 9 million people as a wine market in Nigeria out of a population of about 160 million. But obviously, that is 2007 figures. So if you look at the growth of Nigeria's economy in the last 7-8 years, Nigeria being declared Africa's largest economy. If you look at the consumption of champagne in Nigeria for last year, 50 million pounds. If you look at the amount of posh Panameras that are sold in Nigeria on a monthly basis, I think what is sold on a monthly basis is what South Africa sells in a year.
But how do we make sense of that, though, Adetunji? I mean, we're seeing such an attractiveness in terms of luxury brands in the Nigerian market, and it certainly seems as if wine falls into that broader portfolio. What's driving this consumption?
Well, it's common sense. Before 1985, I think a lot of products, imported things in Nigeria were banned, from coffee to even things like cornflakes, clothes. They were called contraband. And so what would people do? They would travel to the UK or go to Milan. Some people would go and bring them in and sell them, and they will be very expensive. So now what you have is that there's an open market. With democracy, anyone can set up shop in Nigeria. So we've had people like Miller go into Nigeria, Emene Glido, Zegna has gone into Nigeria, Hugo Boss is in Nigeria, because Nigerians have buying power. And a lot of them are very stylish. They want to wear the best clothes, the best shoes, drink the best champagne, live in the best house. So I think that's what's driving it. The huge population, the fact that people are upwardly mobile. And so, yeah, Nigeria is very compelling in terms of lifestyle, and wine is a part of that.
And in South Africa, Matume, to what extent can we talk about wine as an investment class? Are we seeing it being an attractive investment class for those who are really looking to grow their pot of gold?
Certainly. I mean, if you look at investment in general, it's all about return on it.
Yeah.
And with that said, wine is quite dynamic in terms of the sector, from a view that it's got a lot of inputs that go into it, so the cost of what you put in is by far higher than what you get out. But having said that, it's not a short-term thing, it's a long-term investment. Always an investor has to think about that. And those who have to date invested, I think the view is along those lines of saying it's not just on the basis of short-term. However, having said that, there's other areas in which the wine business tend to diversify into tourism, as I mentioned also, and other products within the wine business, olives amongst others, that are related. That can be as a diversification in terms of exploring other areas.
I want us to interrogate this idea of wine tourism, and I'll get back to it, but I want to take a step back and maybe get a granular understanding of who's investing in wine in South Africa. We're often told that the black population feels that wine is an aspirational vehicle, and we're seeing them now begin to embrace the idea of wine as an investment class. Are you seeing those trends really reflected compared to other investment assets?
Fact is, it's a very capital intensive sector. And with that said, it means one has to be careful at what level of investment one is coming at. Meaning that the value chain, it's either you come in at entry level, which is primary production, and that takes a long time. That's why I started by saying it's a long-term investment over and above it just being an investment. One has to think of where you fit in with your investment level. I would say it varies. In terms of whether you want to look at it as a very expensive investment or a cheap investment, it's a question of how, in what area of the value chain do you want to play in. It can either be at bottling level or be at marketing. And we've seen quite a huge investment and participation of, say, previously disadvantaged in the industry through the high end of the value chain, which is marketing. So it varies. And I suppose it depends on your pocket at how far you'd want to go in terms of investment.
It depends on your pocket in terms of where you want to play on the value chain. Can we say the same of Nigeria? I mean, what Matume is telling us now is that you can come in at a primary level, but you have various stages or phases in the value chain that you can put your money in. Where are we seeing the most opportunities? If you can give us a sense of in the Nigerian value chain, and if there is a broader African landscape that we can talk about.
Look, I think first of all, the Nigerian market is typically, it's not like South Africa where the wine is actually produced here. So you have the full value chain here, from bottling to the corks and everything. And in terms of, obviously, they import the wood, the barrels. But in Nigeria, basically, they're dealing with the end product. And sometimes when you're dealing with an end product, you don't become creative in how to get as much value out of the end product. I think in Nigeria, the opportunities that have come out in terms of lifestyle for wine is in, if you look at the clubs, for example, people will drink Cristal. There was a time when people were drinking maybe 100 bottles of Cristal Louis Rodero, which is about 3,000 rand a bottle in one night at a club, because for them is elitist and is escapist. So if you had a club in Nigeria, the amount of money you make, even though you're not importing the wine, was amazing. And so also what happens is, what is now happening, which we did about 4 years ago, which hadn't been happening in Nigeria, was the dinner part, the fine dining part, because people like to go out and have dinner. Typically what people would have is a la carte. They will have a starter, and they will have maybe their mains. But when we started doing 4-course wine pairing, a lot of people have started doing that now. But people now expect that when they're doing a wedding, that it should be a 4-course wedding with less people, as opposed to originally about 5,000 people will come to your wedding and they'll all be eating maybe jollof rice or whatever. So we're seeing a lot of movements in our wine. A lot more people are investing in liquor. A lot more people are importing wine.
Yeah.
The brands, 5 years ago, you would only see maybe the wines under the Distal brand more visible, like Alto and Dublinville. Now we have Brampton, we have a lot of labels.
Are we seeing Nigeria perhaps as also taking advantage of itself being a regional powerhouse and maybe beginning to export some of the stock that they're able to import to surrounding markets? Is that at all happening? And how is cross-border trade of the liquor industry in Nigeria?
Well, typically it's like South Africa. A lot of people, I have friends in Gaborone who tell me that they would rather come and shop in Sandton because they have more diversity, more quality. So in Nigeria, a lot of people on the, Togo, Ghana, even Burkina Faso, all those West African countries, that some of them don't have the buying power to be able to go and bring in a shipload of the same stuff. They go into Nigeria and buy stuff. They go to Onitsha market, they go to Lagos market. So in fact, Nigeria feeds the the region in terms of goods. So you don't have to take products into Togo, for example, into Lome, when you know they will be cheaper for you to land it in Lagos and come by road and get it. So we've seen a lot of that leaning in on the part of Nigeria, leaning into the other countries.
Matum, if you can give us maybe your top 3 tips, and I know that we can't generalize in terms of people investing in wine, because as you've indicated already, there are different phases and different levels, but for a person who's on the outside and trying to get into the industry as an investor, top 3 red flags or tips that you can give them to begin to think about before they engage with the industry.
I think first I want to allude to what Tunji has just said, that innovation is very key. As much as Nigeria is not directly involved in primary production, but it's how they present wine that creates opportunities around that. So when you come to investment, whether you want to come in at primary level or at high end, think about how innovatively, how different you're going to do things to what has already been done. And indeed, this has been evident in Nigeria, for instance. Pairing with the food in Nigeria vis-a-vis if you went there as just an importer that's just bringing wine, you're creating an opportunity for other offerings around that. So an investor should always take into account that whenever they do things, they need to think about how differently they want to do things. Innovative is one of the key things that is most important in the wine industry, because it differentiates you from one product to the other. And therefore, you have to think about how you're going to be creative in this industry.
Before we wrap and go to break, let's quickly touch on wine tourism. And what comes to mind for me is Stellenbosch here in South Africa. I've got tons and tons of people that keep going to Stellenbosch, not only just for the tourist attractions, but to get married. And it all seems as if marriage and wine have somehow converged into this one idyllic vision. What are the basic premises of selling wine as a tourism destination?
I think your focus has been on investment primarily. And again, if you look at other investors that are coming in, such as the Chinese businesses that are coming in, they are not just in Stellenbosch. The acquisition of the Val de Vie, a winery in between Franschhoek and Paarl, is outside of Stellenbosch. It's another region. Also, it's got a lot of offering about the ambience and the beauty of the Cape Winelands. So I think what needs to happen is that moving forward, we need to now start talking about other offerings within the winelands, not just Stellenbosch.
How do we get them the same marketing muscle? Because clearly Stellenbosch has done a very, very good job of putting themselves on the map.
Well, obviously the regional offices have to do work in that area to ensure that there's visibility. But it speaks directly to the fact that diversifying so that you are not just known about Stellenbosch as the only wine producing region. There's many others which have actually got offerings totally different and which differentiates a product above all. So we need to explore that one further.
Well, it certainly sounds like a challenge to the regional offices has been levied to increase the marketing visibility of other regions outside of Stellenbosch when it comes to opportunities for wine investment in South Africa. Let's take a quick break, but when we come back, more on investing in wine in the broader continent of Africa. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Invest Africa. Tonight we're talking about wine investment in Africa. Remember that we certainly do value your suggestions and your feedback, so do send us an email. That's to investafrica@abn360.com, or talk to us on Twitter, following me at @nozipombandra or at CNBC Africa, and using the hashtag InvestAfrica. Still with me, my guests in Johannesburg, I have Matom Mbate. He's the marketing manager for the Americas and Africa at Wines of South Africa, and Adetunji Omotola, the founder of African Wine Circle. Adetunji, let me come back to you, because when we left, we were talking about the regional offices flexing their muscles here in South Africa in terms of improving marketing visibility. And off air, you said that without deep marketing pockets, if I may quote you, then you don't really have a fighting chance in the industry. Give us more insight into that.
Okay, look, you know, they always say the top 5 and the bottom 20. In the wine industry, there's some farms that they generally will call cooperatives that have a huge, well, first of all, they have a wide diversity of wines, from the whites to the reds to the rosés, even entry-level sparklings, but they also produce millions of bottles. So even if they were to say they will put 10 cents on each bottle, the advertising budget will be so huge. Then there's those farms who produce stunning wines, but they don't have any money for advertising. They have to spend everything on their stock and on their labeling, and even finding agents who have knowledge of wine to be able to showcase those wines in top restaurants or maybe in hotels in Africa, for example. So if you really don't have a deep pocket, if you don't really have a backing or a long history of that wine making that people have come to recognize worldwide, it can be very difficult, especially in Africa where people don't have the sophisticated knowledge of the various, even cultivars that exist, and they don't know the difference in a Merlot and a Cab. So that could be difficult.
Matome, let's pick up on that, and in particular get a sense of how South African brands are faring against their international counterparts, especially when they're outside of South African shelves. Do we have the marketing muscle to put us on the shelf?
No, we don't have. Work needs to be done in terms of investment, both the industry as well as our government, to ensure the presence of the industry in the markets. I mean, currently we export just about 21 million liters to the continent, compared to Sweden alone that actually imports 26 million of South African wines. And if you're looking at the continent being the key area that we want to focus on, we need to really work hard in ensuring that we invest more in the continent. So having said that, we need to see more intervention from government, but also a more role playing from the industry in collaboration to ensure that there's enough in the pot to drive presence of the industry.
Let's unpack those two proposals that you put on the table, in particular when you talk about government intervention. What exactly does the industry need to thrive?
Currently, if you compare oneself with the likes of Italy, France, and other wine-producing regions, they've got huge budgets and huge financial backing from their governments. It's something that we need to see somewhat a contribution and support financially, beyond just going to shows, but creating an environment that is conducive, be it trade barriers, be it duties that get paid by the South African exporters to the markets, as well as ensuring that there's continuous activation in markets. I mean, to date, Wines of South Africa has been active in just doing one event per market per year. It's never sufficient. It's nothing wow compared to what the other wine producing regions do. So we need to look at a collective approach. There are some talks going around at this stage, but we need to fast track that, because these other wine producing regions are coming in very strong. And we would like to rather see more presence of South Africa in the continent than any other.
What's holding back cross-border movement within the continent of wine?
Systems that are not harmonized in terms of customs systems, first of all. Delays at ports, amongst other things. These are some of the things that needs to be be monitored and be negotiated between governments to ensure there's a smooth and easy access to markets. And other barriers, as you know, that in Nigeria, for instance, you have to register a brand with NAFDAC, which is very costly, and that takes a bit of time, about 6 months or so, before a label is approved. So all those kind of things impact negatively on the movement of products into the markets.
It sounds like in the South African context, there's still a little bit of regulatory bottlenecks that if they are ironed out, you might see an increase in the trade of wine and increased investment in wine. If we were to look at the Nigerian context, what would you consider to be the biggest threats to future growth of the consumption level at the very least, and the imports that you've seen of the liquor industry broadly?
Well, I think the first, second, third, and fourth is bureaucracy. Matome has talked about the congestion at the ports. Also, I think we on this side, we have to come up with a more sexy way of moving wine. Moving it in bottles is very heavy. It increases the cost of carrying it around. We have to try and find another way to move wine, not just moving it by sea freight, which seems to be the bulk of the wine. There are people who come into this country and they buy tons of wine from duty free, and when they take it to Nigeria after about a week, they have to call again and say that wine is finished. They're looking for people to carry wine around. There must be other ways to carry wine, but I think critically, NAFDAC for Nigeria, if they were to become more efficient, ask for less money, I think it will increase the volumes of wine by at least 30%. on an annual basis.
Do we have best case examples, even if they're not on the continent, where we can say, you know, it really seems as if they've got the policy and the regulatory environments well merged, and we're seeing the industry booming and investment booming? And maybe let's get examples from it, but let me start with you, Adetunji.
Look, I think that markets, you know, when you look at markets, each market is different. But if you look at the success of Australia, for example, where a lot of people are talking about Australian wines, I think Australian wines have done better from a New World perspective than any other country, be it Chile, Argentina, or South Africa. But I also think the reason for that is because Australia doesn't have as many diversified resources as South Africa, for example. So they have to focus on what they've got. So I think that helps them, and they also work together. I don't think the South African wine industry is as homogeneous as the Australian one. And so it's like comparing the Emirates airline. You know, they've done very well because the airline is actually a marketing company. So they use it to bring people into Dubai, and then they pass people around from Dubai into China or into India. So I think that's really the challenge there.
Matume, you're nodding to Adetunji's comments.
To a certain extent, yes, I do agree with him. But yes, there's a lot of areas beyond just the innovation of getting wines across in certain packaging and so forth. The key area here is that we are, for instance, in the SADC region. We need to find a benefiting approach in terms of us being in the regional bloc. We have not seen much of that because the systems are not well harmonized. You'd find those are the bottlenecks that we're faced with in terms of going into markets. Innovation will kick in as once we're in the markets as when we go into markets. But access to market is the key challenge that we're faced with. And some of the key markets such as Angola and Nigeria, getting into market, that is the biggest challenge which needs to be addressed. And if we can have those attended to, and it becomes a bilateral sometimes, in the case bilateral government-to-government issues, but we need to have those addressed soon.
So there are market access issues. Let's talk about taxes, and in particular the elevation of sin taxes as a moral thing to do on the parts of government. To what extent have we seen that somehow subdue investment into the sector?
And that would talk obviously from a local point of view, because the sin tax literally apply from the local point. There's discussions going around how to actually curb that challenge to ensure that those figures that I spoke of, the 26 billion contribution to the GDP, employment is never compromised. Because when you address these issues, you have to take all of these things into account. But discussions are going around how do we find a very harmonized and agreed approach into the whole issue around taxes, because it impacts negatively if it's not looked into to the industry. It's a negative indeed.
So on the domestic front in South Africa, we talk about sin taxes and how they're impacting on the industry, but there's also a big red flag just generally around the black market, around liquor and the fraudulent activity that happens around the sector. To what extent do we see this as a significant challenge in Nigeria?
Look, I think people drink when they're happy and when they're sad. I mean, I know about people who are even Muslims in Nigeria who drink from those kettles that they use to go for prayers. And I think it helps to reduce their high blood pressure. But I think what it is you see, what I'm angry about is that in Africa, countries that are the poorest have the highest taxes on alcohol. And also what that happens is when people then start to smuggle it. And when they smuggle it, then the people who are bringing it in legitimately don't benefit from it, because you find that somebody else hasn't even paid any duties on it. So I think in Nigeria, where, as I gave you the figures before, about 9 million people are drinking, some people, one person might be drinking for 20 people. So, you know, I don't think you can really regulate people from stopping to drink or even increasing taxes. That's not going to stop people. But I think the African governments who talk all the time about regional integration, it's bad enough that we have 33 different currencies that you have to convert to the US dollar first to make sense of the rand. But the fact that, you know, we can't move goods freely and move them as frequently is a problem. And that wine gets caught up in that. Not just wine, obviously, but wine.
Other goods too.
Because it's more sophisticated and fragile, it gets even more caught up in it. And we have had a show with CNBC before where we talked about damage to our wines from between Lagos or Accra to Lagos. So people just didn't know what
Are we able to quantify that damage?
Well, look, the damage that we had wasn't much significant in terms of what we were doing at the time. But I can tell you that everybody who's transported wine in Africa has had a story of their wines being damaged, either through a forklift or somebody broke it, or it's just they don't understand how to handle fragile goods, especially wine that is liquid gold.
I've got less than a minute, and I'm going to give you a chance to quickly to respond to what Adetunji just said, but also for you maybe to just touch on the very thorny issue that we have in South Africa, and that's the labor environment around the wine industry. Lots of poverty and a sense that a lot of the workers are oppressed and not given dignified work. Are we making progress on that front?
Just touching on what he just spoke of now. I think there's an opportunity for the industry to really make an impact in the continent from a view of that. We're not taking wine to dump it in the continent. There's the roles that is playing along the lines of educating the consumers how to drink wine responsibly. That's a very critical area. And that's our approach in ensuring that we create opportunities for others that can teach, such as Tunji, in the market. On the issue of labor, very sensitive subject, but it's quite an interesting to look at the type of reports that we've been hearing about. Quite often, there is no thorough openness about, really, is it people in the wine industry that are carrying on the way they do, abusing workers in the farms, or is it other farms that are not wine related? So one is to do a thorough finding on that. But secondly, to date, reports that have been out there have not been substantiated with evidence that have been brought forward. So these are some of the issues that need to be actually taken seriously by the media when they report facts about, is it really happening and what farm? Because there are systems in place within the South African wine industry to trace if a farm or a farm worker is abused, and that can be brought forward. In fact, if any of such acts are known of, must be brought forward.
If acts are known of, they must be brought forward. And that's all we have time for tonight, unfortunately. A very big thank you to my guests for sharing their insights. And of course, my producer. We're talking about wine and investing on wine in the continent, and I have a glass of water at the desk. I think certainly a mistake on that front, but hopefully we'll get wine next time. For you at home, please remember to send us your comments. The details are reflecting on your screen. Tonight with Bruce is up next, so do stay tuned. From myself and the Invest Africa team that's given us a show without wine, it's goodbye for now.